Welcome back, listeners, and Happy New Year 2024. We welcome you to Mosaic's Community Life Podcast, Life in Canada, Episode 17. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our podcast today. My name is Jane Teasdale, and I'm one of the co-owners of Mosaic Home Care and Community Resource Center. Our organization focuses on person-centered care, social connection, and community. Our featured guest today is Mark Venning, researcher, writer, and commentator. Age-inclusive communities, global longevity narratives, and technology horizons. Thank you, Mark, for coming on today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Right, good to see you.
Before we begin, I will read a very short bio about Mark. For more information and Mark's extensive information, I would review his website, and that can be found at www.changerangers.com. Mark Venning is a researcher, writer, and commentator on topics regarding the social and business aspects of aging populations, where he proposes changing concepts in recording and longevity society. His weekly Tuesday blog is in its 14th year. Mark is also an associate member of the International Federation on Aging. And when I spoke to Mark, we were trying to figure out when we first connected. And we first connected at the NIA Summit in 2017. So I have known Mark for quite a while. And then subsequently on other events, one of them is the International Federation on Aging, the Cafe Sessions. And that IFA is a wonderful place to connect with other organizations, to connect to other countries as well, and listen to academics and professionals speak on different processes, on different models, and different ideas that you can use in the community. And the website for that is ifa.ngo. Welcome, Mark. Again, it's a pleasure to have you on the line with me. Firstly, I was wondering how you came up with the name Change Rangers for your website, and how did you get into this field of work?
Okay, so it's a two-part question there.
Yes.
So while I was working in the field of career consulting back in the mid to late 90s, I was attending a conference in New York City. And I kind of created this name, Change Rangers, on the back of a napkin, really. It's sort of a metaphor and an answer to a question that I had, which is, what role do I really serve when I'm helping people through change in their careers? So I kind of reminded myself of the park ranger. You know, when you go to the national park,
Yes.
the ranger's there to guide you through the woods, but they're not in your face kind of thing. They tell you where the bears are going to eat your tent and where the fires are going to, and all that stuff. So the metaphor, the Change Rangers meaning of it really changed over the years as the focus of my work evolved. And so, for example, the first tagline I had was envision the promise of longevity. And when I moved into this field, and then because to me, longevity is only a promise. It's not a guarantee, right? But then in 2014, I came up with the current tagline, which is Recoding a Longevity Society. So recoding borrows from technology. And for me, if we're going to be facing change in the future, then we're going to have to recode the framework for longevity and aging. And for me, that means taking a look at our social systems for current generations and future generations. Recoding the language for policies and attitudes and perceptions around aging, and other social constructs, for example, the word retirement. The second part of your question was what led me into this. Well, as I mentioned, I was doing work in career consulting back in the 90s. I found that I was doing my best work with people who are, generally speaking, over 50, let's say. And I found my groove after a period of time in a combination of two things. One is entrepreneurship in later life, and the reframing of the concept of retirement. Because a lot of people were saying things like, I'm too young to retire. And then on the negative side of that, they'd say, well, who's going to want me at my age kind of thing. So I was really, really focused on that. And in 2001, things really kind of took off after the New York City experience and so on. And a couple of things happened. I was asked to rewrite some retirement programs for this career management firm that I was working with. And so I was doing that. And at the same time, I met a guy who was a client who was 90 years old. And he was had let go from his job. I won't give away all the story, but he was let go of his job at the age of 89.
That's like 89. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's unheard of, somewhat.
Yes.
And anyway, long or short of it, my experience with working with somebody who'd been working that long was quite inspiring. And I asked, what did I miss most about working full time, kind of thing? And his number one answer was the people. It was
Yes,
all about
that social
socializing.
connection of your colleagues. I guess you have a schedule, obviously when you're going into work, you have a schedule and you have, like-minded people and colleagues around you. Yeah.
Right.
I think
And it
that's
was,
the part that people miss probably the most, and their work that they enjoy doing.
well, in a way, his answer kind of melded with something else that happened around the same time. By accident, so I found this book, the Longevity Revolution by Theodore Roszak, and the quote that I lifted from that book that was chimed in with what this client of mine was saying, the 90-year-old. And this is the quote from the book. He says, if more people are going to live longer, it's time to start finding a good social use for those extra years. And that kind of chimed in with what this client was telling me. But along the way, just to finish off the story about being in the field, there were three milestones that occurred along the way. In 2003, I was invited to Ottawa, and Statistics Canada was doing a symposium on what they call new issues in retirement. And by the way, those issues haven't gone away. They've just maybe changed a little bit. So I was asked to do a presentation on the global trends of later life careers, which was my bailiwick, as it were. While I was there, I met this guy named Victor Marshall, who was a founding member of the Canadian Association of Gerontology. And based on that symposium in '03, it led to a book on the subject of new frontiers in retirement. And there was a chapter there called The Underlying Revolution in Longevity. So when you talk about things all coming together around that word longevity, I kind of morphed away from the word retirement as much as possible.
Yes.
And
And
in
I
20,
guess, I guess it's finding new things that you can connect to as well. You may have had a job for so many years, and then, I guess with regards to your interests and hobbies, then you can form into other types of fields that you want to get into as you get older. So I think that also
exactly.
happens. Yes.
And if I go back and look at my entire career, going back to the year dot, everything's been evolutionary for me. I never really planned anything. It just sort of morphed from one thing to another, which is kind of contrary to career advice at some point. But anyway, in 2012, the other thing that happened was I joined the Sheridan College here in Oakville. They have the Elder Research Center where I was a
Yes,
member there for
correct.
6 years. And while I was there, you might have been at a couple of those events there. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think some of those meetings at Sheridan I
Yeah,
attended.
they always had some great content. One of the people that was a speaker there, and I think it was 2013, was a gentleman by the name of Alexander Kalash. And he was with the International Longevity Center in Brazil. And he did a lot of work on the age-friendly movement with the WHO back in, I guess it was 2007, when they were framing that. And what he said at this presentation he was giving, what do we do with this gift of longevity? So here's him talking about it being a gift. I was
Yes.
calling it a promise. So it's kind
Yes.
of the same kind of thing,
So
right?
similar.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And I notice, definitely I reviewed your website, again, www.changerangers.com, and you have, quite a bit of interesting content, research and books and information on conferences, your blog writing and other interesting information. So please, also listeners, take a look at that. And Mark, can you speak on your work of age-inclusive communities and why this is important?
So Your question was speaking to age-friendly communities and why it's important. So in 2007, WHO came up with this age-friendly cities guide, which was a work in progress for a number of years. And what's happened over the years, the term age-friendly has somewhat been hijacked a little bit. Risks sounding like tokenism,
Mm.
dialogue about senior-centric issues, when in actual fact, the spirit of age-friendly is multi-generational.
Yes.
So now and in the future, if we want input beyond the current older populations, then we're talking about the future caregivers of tomorrow, as it were. A more appropriate term is age inclusive, and that's why I've sort of hinged everything around that. Because in my view, and this is the big phrase here, that the evolution of age-friendly community is every generation's project,
Yes,
right?
you're absolutely right. From, yes, going into the schools, teaching, how to be, friendly and working together with all ages really in the community. I think that's important.
Well, but beyond that, it's even helping develop policy. If you're going to have people developing policy for age-friendly communities or age-inclusive communities, you've got to have everybody at the table. You've got to ask younger people as much as older people, right?
Yes.
So that's the way I view it.
Ah,
So my thing about, everybody's talking about AI these days.
yes,
My
AI.
big, my big AI is age inclusive. That's where the AI movement is for me. So it's age inclusive.
Yeah, it is important. I mean, definitely all these things that you're talking about. It takes a bit of work, and we're nowhere near where we need to be. I think in Ontario, Canada, I think we need to move it a little bit faster because we already have a big issue on our hands. But
Yeah,
so
and a lot of people still don't even know what the word age friendly means. So there's a
yes,
bit an advocacy job still to be done with everyday people out there.
yes, and within our communities as well. So, Mark, what is the current work you are working on in this area now?
As it relates to age friendly and age inclusive,
Yes, yes,
yeah, excuse me. In 2021, I became a member of the Standards Council of Canada. I won't go into the story as how that happened, but it did. Actually, it happened through being on, talking to people on the IFA Global Cafe series, actually.
yes.
Anyway, the Standards Council of Canada is a member organization of the ISO network around the world. And in 2017, they developed a category called Aging Societies. And they were doing standards development. And so far, what the ISO has worked on is three categories: developing standards for age-inclusive workforce, care-inclusive organizations, and dementia-inclusive communities.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some very, very serious kind of work going on there. The project that I'm involved in, the current working group, is a brand new one, started last year in summertime. It's called Smart Multi-Generational Neighborhoods. And for me, that was a perfect fit because it ties in with the age inclusive story, right? So this is early days yet. It's an international project. It involves people from all over the world. And you can imagine the cultural differences around the world that go into making that up. But one of the things it talks about is it's going to provide planning and urban design guidance at the neighborhood level and design guidance for individual buildings, such as housing and key community facilities.
So that's a lot of work. I mean, we do need that with, definitely within Toronto. I mean, we have so many, condos going up, and, where are we supposed to be going? Where's the green areas that people can come to and park benches? Where can people socialize and have social programs as well? So, we also need more community spaces and community centers for all ages to partake in. And so that,
Yeah, and I mean, there's all sorts of things that go into this, like co-housing, for example, and there's different forms and options for housing, that are being explored in the
yes,
community as well.
yes. And lots, I mean, that's a whole other YouTube
That's a whole other
discussion and
show.
podcast is as we mentioned before, of retirement homes and, cost effective, places and, housing for people, affordable housing. And so I just want to carry on with the questions. Can you speak on ageism within Ontario, and what things do you notice in our society that we need to change?
Well, I don't want to go down an entire rabbit hole on this because it's a very large conversation, but it doesn't help when the media still uses phrases like silver tsunami and that aging population is a burden and a crisis. And that's not just an Ontario thing; it's all over the world. I think that we would have learned something through the COVID period, but we still are dealing with these issues. But the issue for me is that older adults in a longevity society are still mistakenly seen as a homogeneous group of people, right? And that's not true. So we have to kind of dispel these kind of random myths about that.
Yes.
We can't lump and stigmatize people as 65 plus, for example, which is still used as a benchmark by our social structures. But we still, if you remember during the pandemic, we talked about over 65s being at risk and vulnerable and they're elderly, that we have to, all that stuff. So we perpetuate this with our own attitudes over time, but it works both ways.
Yes.
Attitudes towards younger generations are also skewed. And you'd think that, one thing that we should have discovered that we have in common intergenerationally is that since the pandemic, all ages are in various ways dealing with loneliness, isolation, stress, and so on, mental illness. And that's, I think, the bigger headline that we should be paying more attention to.
Yeah, it was, I guess, the different ages. It was, over COVID, like definitely the younger children who, were starting to go to school, they were missing that socialization. Then you have the teenagers or the university that's the time of their life in going out and, going to school, going to university, connecting and meeting new people, traveling, and that obviously was all stopped. So definitely there is a lot more mental health within that age group as well.
Well, getting back to perceptions around this, not to go on, but there was a quote from a 22-year-old that I dug up not too long ago, and they were talking about watching these deaths in long-term care homes, and this 22-year-old said, "I don't know if I want to live that long, if that's going to happen to me," kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whoa, So the notion, I think, of longevity has to be seen through the lens of a 22-year-old, that longevity is more about sustainability, because that's the phrasing that younger generations are latching onto the most when we talk about the climate change and everything else that's going on. So it's really about recoding age-friendly, going back to that, with what I would call an intergenerational thread, right?
Yes, that's a good term.
Yeah.
And how can we advocate, as professionals and people in the community, more for older persons within our communities? What are some of the things that you think we should be working on?
Well, I think there's kind of three sort of big picture things. One is, again, this notion of sustainability mindset. So all our conversations should be built around that. Everyday conversations we have with people in coffee shops and wherever we're at, right? It's an intergenerational journey we're on. Now, there's a great example of this in Scotland. I think I was mentioning this to you the other day when we were speaking. There's an organization there called GenerationsWorkingTogether.org. And this is the third year they're having this global intergenerational week. I think it's in April. Canada was part of it, representation last year as well. So that's one thing, is to develop more of these kind of intergenerational hubs for conversation. The second, I think, goes back to the school system. What curriculum can we fuse career and life course theory into so that people have more understanding of what it is, right? And then thirdly, we've got to stop building fortresses for old people. We've got to have mixed housing and multi-generational things, for example. And so therefore we have to recode, I think, our conversation around the life and healthcare continuum. from younger ages through older ages.
Yeah. No, those are excellent points. And, I do know within Mosaic, the company that I work on, that we do try and do a lot of intergenerational programs. One we did at the Evergreen Brickworks, which it was an intergenerational dance party. And Evergreen Brickworks provided the space. Mosaic, figured out what kind of event we were going to do. And it was just so wonderful, seeing people coming together. People could just drop in. There were families, there were newborns, there were children, there were older persons, there were teenagers, there were youths. And so everybody was dancing together. So that's the type of thing of that intergenerational community. And then the other thing, that we're working on with Mosaic is actually in a church setting. That's where our offices are. We're at Armour Heights Presbyterian Church in Toronto. And again, that is seen as a community hub where all ages are coming together. People are volunteering. And in fact, we have the use of the church, a gentleman who knitted Tweedle muffs, they're called. And we give them to Alzheimer's patients. They go to the hospitals, Sunnybrook and North York General. We provide them for them to use for their clients or geriatric floors. And so the gentleman had knitted all these Tweedle muffs, and then the youths are going to be decorating them with buttons and thread and ribbon, and then that's going to the hospital. So I think that, that's a real group effort of different ages coming together, doing something helpful for the community. So that's our, I guess, input into the community through Mosaic. And Mark,
And I think there's probably lots of other examples of that happening in communities around the country. But
definitely.
we're not exactly out there covering the news on it, really.
No, but there are, the community agencies in Toronto and all over, UK and all these, small villages, people are helpful and trying new things and trying new models and, different activities and trying to bring people together of all ages. So yeah, things are out there. You just have to look for them and know where to
Exactly.
find them.
Exactly.
Definitely.
That's what a change ranger does.
Yes, yes. And information is power. That's
Right.
right.
Exactly.
And then, Mark, what countries do you find are a little bit further ahead in creating age-inclusive communities?
Well, I think the constant example most people would use are Scandinavian countries. For example, Denmark is always referenced quite a lot, and the Netherlands, for example. And most most European countries are further ahead. The UK, and then going further east into Singapore, Korea, Japan, and so on. Not that there's other things aren't going on in the US or Canada, but we're a little bit further behind in terms of embedding them in society. I just found an example the other day. I was on a webinar with the AARP International, and they have a webinar series called Equity by Design.
Mm-hmm.
And they were using an example from Europe, one of the several that they had. That's called urbanage.eu is the organization. And they have a project that involves 3 cities or regions, Flanders, Helsinki, and a town called Santander in Spain. And they're addressing urban planning, age-friendly solutions, or age-inclusive, if you will, and older people engagement, which is what you were talking about Mosaic trying to do, right? And one of their objectives is leveraging technology into these cities using big data analysis and so on. It's a big, long story with that. But all that to say there are really interesting things going on in places like Europe, and that's just one example.
No, there's definitely terrific things. I think you have to spend time doing the research of looking to see what other countries are doing. It takes time, but they're out there, different ideas. And finally, just a point I'd like to make, and in the newspaper, I think from the UK, I guess it was probably around the holiday season, UK had put out an article, I can't remember which paper it was, but the benefits of working later on in life. And, at one time people couldn't wait to retire, at whatever age. And now people seem to be, wanting to stay working, or that they're enjoying what they're doing. And so there's been a number of studies speaking on the benefits of working later in life. And this is some research from Harvard Medical School. And one of them is the benefits such as mental stimulation and the socialization and enjoying and being passionate what what you like about your job. The mental stimulation and social engagement are associated with staving off chronic disease. So, of course, some people work past the age of 65, and some studies have linked working past retirement with better health and longevity. Do you have any points that you'd like to add to this?
Well, it goes back to some of the work I was doing when I was in the career management field. I am a great believer in a concept that came out, I guess it was 1989, actually. Charles Handy, who was a Brit, he's written several books, but the book he came out with was called The Age of Unreason. And in there, he's got a whole chapter on portfolio careers. So it's a sort of a blend of different activities, paid and unpaid. And I designed a whole program around this portfolio career concept, that's sort of borrowing from his philosophy on this. So I think that there's lots of ways of working, and it's just finding the way you feel comfortable with, right? As long as you want to the point you made earlier.
Yes.
But one of the most limiting social value demarcations we've ever had is the age 65, and using words like working age population still stigmatizes that thought. And unfortunately, even through the COVID pandemic era, a lot of people were returning to that thought. I don't want to keep working anymore. This is too much. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, this has kind of shifted a little bit. Yes, there are people who still want to work a lot longer, but most of the people that I talk to over the years say, I want to do it differently. Mm-hmm. And you define what different looks like, right?
Yeah, for you, the individual, yes.
Exactly, but you're absolutely right. It's the social stimulation, going back to that 90-year-old client that I had.
Yeah, and I guess that's, in your brain, your schedule of, getting up in the morning, getting your coffee, going on the computer, finding out the news of the day, going to the office, chatting with, your other colleagues. So, and again, you have to enjoy what you're doing and of course, being passionate about it. So I guess in your bio that you had sent, in your off time when you're not working, that you also sat on the board of Oakville Galleries, a contemporary art museum based in Ontario. And in 2020, you became a member of the Venice in Peril, a UK organization that funds the restoration of Venetian monuments, buildings, and works of art. So that was, one of your deep interests. And I think you've been to, you're going to Venice in May?
I am. This will be my 10th visit to Venice in May. Yeah.
Yeah, Venice, I haven't been there yet. I've been to Florence, but Venice sometime is on the list.
Well, for me, if there is ever an icon of longevity, it's Venice, because it's been existent, built on water for 1,600 years.
It's incredible.
So, there you go, right?
And obviously it's I guess it's a walkable community.
Well, if you can stand on 100 and some odd bridges that are there, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. I know Bordeaux, is a place that, I enjoy going. And, I look at these places when I go traveling now. Is this a walkable community? If you had a walker or a cane, or you were in a wheelchair, could you get around? What's the transportation like? Is it a place that's easy to live in?
Well, I'm going to try to pay attention. Well, let me cut.
Go ahead.
Well, based on what you were just saying about walkability and so on, I'm going to pay attention when I'm on this visit to Venice to see what changes they've made, if any, to the accessibility issue. Because of all these bridges and that, how do you get wheelchairs up and down? You
Yeah.
know?
That's right. Whereas Bordeaux, what we found is everything was flat. The cars were not able to go into the main area. There was a tram from the airport right into the city. So yeah, it is. We've been, visiting a lot of places in France, and we found that is amazing for people to get around as they get older. So at this time, I'd just like to thank you, Mark, for spending time with me and spending time, on our podcast and YouTube, of all the things that you've been doing. And at this time, I usually ask our guests if you would like to leave a takeaway message for our listeners.
Well, I suppose there's a number of things I could say based on my wide interests, but I'll keep it short on going back to this multi-generational theme. For anybody who's older, let's say, later life, whatever it is, whatever benchmark year you want to choose, have a friendship base that's multi-generational. The more you hang out with people with the same age as you're not picking up the new thoughts. You're not energized by, hanging around people of all ages. And I'm pleased to say that I do have people young in their 20s and as old as 90. So there you go. So for me, that's the first thing. But we also have to pay attention to the fact that the age pyramid of the 20th century that kind of looked like this is now becoming like a pillar. So I call it the flattening of age, right? So, for example, if you want to be sticky for a second, by 2030, the first millennials will be turning 50. And around that time, I'll be 80. So it's still a 30-year gap, but it's pretty, they're kind of the caregivers of tomorrow, right?
Yes.
So we're going to be relying on a lot of that, hopefully. And so that's that piece. And then finally, I should say that if we're going to have this kind of robust, sustainable longevity society, it's going to depend on diversity and active people, not a sedentary population fixated on retirement. We've just got to get away from that.
Yes. No, thank you for that. And just on your first answer about having different ages around you in your social network, just one last thing. My aunt is turning 100. She lives in the UK. And I actually interviewed her, just, taped her. I haven't put it on any social media or anything. But one of the things that she mentioned was she has friends of all ages, so the same as you. She's got younger people, 25, 30, then another group of 50, 60. And then some older friends, like longtime friends as well. But what she says is, a lot of people, are either going into retirement or passing away. They're going into nursing homes. So she says, I need to have different people around me because they take me out to places and they come and visit and they come and, they phone me and check in how I'm doing. So I think that was pretty unique in sort of hearing her on, how she formed her social networks, because it is important that you build on those social networks. You need quite a few social networks out there, and you do have to take action yourself to work on those relationships, I think. So
right.
I think we'll leave it at that. And
nothing happens by accident. You have to make it happen, right?
That's right. Yes, you have to. So on that note, Mark, it was a pleasure having you. It was very interesting listening to what you're doing and the work that you're doing in your website as well. And I will be seeing you, I guess, on the next IFA meeting. And
which is every Friday.
Every Friday morning. It's great. It's great information, great people on the line. So I urge listeners, you can just go onto the IFA website and check that out. So thank you, Mark, again for coming online. Until our next Mosaic's Life in Canada podcast, this is Jane Teasdale signing off from Mosaic. Thank you so much.